All right, so how many people think life exists out there? How many people don't? Everybody's got to vote. How many people think life exists out there? You got to raise your hand. Everybody's got to, Katie. How many think? Okay, so I'm leaving the question generic for a purpose. So I'm leaving that part of the question generic. You get to decide. How many think Earth's the only place where life is?
Do you mean on other planets or heavenly realms? Because obviously there's...
No, I'm talking physical life on another planet somewhere. I'm not talking angelic realm or anything like that. Yes, I am. I'm intentionally not answering that question. So, all right, so we have a small contingent of yes, there's life out there. I'm going to ask the small contingent that was here to move over with the other. Raise your hand again if you thought life was out there. We got a Sean. Actually, you get to move over here because there's more people over here. All the there's no life out there people just get to hang out. You can talk with other no life people. All the no life people over here are going to have a network test. So what I want is the people who say there's life out there, why? Give me the top 2-3 reasons. People who say there's no life out there, why? Give me your top 2 or 3 reasons. So take a couple of minutes, hash it out. So. Okay. All right, you got about 1 more minute, so kind of wrap it up, elect a spokesperson. All right, let's bring it back in. You didn't hear a word of what they said. All right. So we're going to start with the life only is here on earth crowd. What were some of the main reasons why life is only here on earth? Bible doesn't say anything about anything other than life here on earth. Okay, what else? Yes, Blake.
I think God creates with a purpose.
Okay.
I think he said Jesus came to earth and died for our sins.
Okay.
He has to go to a bunch of different planets to represent that he did it for a bunch of those other planets too.
Okay, so you think there's some theological reasons about how Jesus interacted with humanity. This is the only place. All right. Any other? Yeah, Seth.
In creation, God made Earth special, and he singled us out for a reason.
Okay.
I think that in the creation series of creating life, God didn't go in put any life on other planets, and life can only come from God.
Okay. So you think that, again, it's kind of the creation story says, hey, this is where life is. This is where God did it. All right, very good. Any other? And the no life people over here, or life only on earth people over here can chime in if they thought, hey, there's another reason that wasn't included. Any others?
I would say one of the other reasons would be, so a body, I feel like it starts to go against God's characteristics, because if God made a body of believers, he commands us to fellowship and be together. So if we are separated like that, that kind of goes against what God commands us to be.
All right, very good. Is that what you wanted to say, Emma, or is that good? You agree with him? All right, okay, very good. All right, we kind of got it right there. Got the gamut of what the reasons we thought are. Let's go with the yes, life exists crowd. Yes, Kate, you have.
Okay, we kind of agree. We didn't talk to anybody behind this.
Okay, well, we're going to get both groups.
Okay,
both
so
of us.
we kind of agreed that there's no intelligent life.
Okay, there's no intelligent life.
There's tons of bacteria. And
Okay.
bacteria count as living
Okay.
tons of phyla of bacteria.
Okay.
And then also we figure like plants or like things like that are probably
Definitely not the same ones from here would survive.
Okay.
But I definitely agree that I don't think God would make any intelligent life
Okay.
in other places and then separate them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think, kind of agree, but there may be other kinds of non-intelligent, non-sentient life, all right? The other group, any, you would agree with that? You have anything to add to that, Brett?
I agree, but also Hugh Ross talked about spiritual and soulful animals.
Okay.
So humans are the only spiritual animals because we can have a connection with God. He's brought the spiritual to us, and we've had the interaction with Him.
Okay.
So like there's the animals where they're soulful, like you see like dogs. Hugh Ross was talking about how like they show their emotions through
Okay.
like
Mm-hmm.
like a wild one compared to a tame one, wild wolf to a tame wolf,
Mhm.
like different animals, like different birds, how they interact with humans and people
Right.
that never seen. Because like humans cause harm,
Okay.
it's kind of his thing, so it's like the animals act different away from humans.
Right.
So like soulful and spiritual is different. So there's probably soulful animals out there, like the microbes, maybe even some like small like squirrel-like
Okay.
animal. But other than that,
So you'd go further than this group and say there's even maybe that next level up of social creatures, but not spiritual creatures.
not spiritual.
Okay, all right.
Spiritual creatures like us.
All right, very good. Any other thoughts that got missed in here? Do you think? Okay, yeah, Nick, what do you got?
I think that the creation events, whether or not you think they were over a period of millions or billions of years, or even a short period of time, that they're miraculous and very
Uh-huh.
specifically done by God,
Correct?
right? So I feel like it wouldn't make any sense for Him to have created any soulless animals, which were made for the purpose of helping humanity, be made anywhere else in the world, I mean, in the universe, and I mean, the miraculous event of creation on Earth, there's no examples of it anywhere else.
So just to,
Even closer.
Okay.
just to piggyback, so God is a God of purpose.
Right?
So if those beings, in other words, kind of what he's saying is there's no purpose for them being there. So why would God put them there?
I would agree with that.
I'm going to push on a little bit. Why do you say there's no purpose for God putting them there?
Well, the creation accounts of God creating animals was all kind of setting up for mankind.
Right?
It's kind of setting up for mankind to be.
Absolutely.
So if, with the same reasoning I was giving before, if mankind being in congregation, being together as believers is the case, then why would there be life outside, even if it's unintelligent life like animals or amoebas or whatever we're getting into?
Okay.
Why would it be outside of where humankind would be?
So all the life here is kind of pointing towards humanity. Without a humanity type creature there, there'd be no reason for the rest of it. That's what you're meaning by the lack of purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Do you have something to add to that, Brett?
I was just gonna say animals do affect the planets, and
Mhm.
like, all the planets were created by God, so it still is creation. Earth isn't the only creation.
Okay.
So, like some other like green leaf plants on planet Z9, B7, whatever.
Hey, you make a good astronomer. We make up names like that all the time. So
Could have some animal that interacts with it that touches into the soil, which brings the nutrients, which helps out
Okay.
the planet. So there is like use for the animals that can be helping God's creation.
gotcha.
So it's like, even though spiritual animals, like soulful animals are definitely here to help us spiritual creatures here on earth. But if there's no spiritual, there's no need for like soulful animals to help the spiritual creatures.
Okay. Very good. Last Oh, well, go Seth and then Blake here, and then I'll tell you what I think.
God tells Adam to name every creature, and I don't think that Adam had the capability to do that for animals on other planets. So,
Okay. All right. Blake.
So Cooper and I, we're on the same side here.
All right.
He said it goes against God's character to not to create life on a different planet.
Okay.
I don't think it goes against his character because he created life. I don't think creating life is against God's character. I don't. So.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me add some more data to this discussion, and then we'll continue it as time goes on here. So I wanted to first speak to the people who thought life only exists here on Earth. And so those who think it exists other places, you can just kind of tune out for a second here. If you think life only exists here on Earth, I think there's good reason to believe that life only exists here on Earth. I just wanted you to know that. And if you thought that life, so this is now just for the people who think life might exist elsewhere. The other people could just kind of tune out. If you think life might exist elsewhere, I think there's good reason to think life might exist elsewhere. Okay? So let me tell you why I think that. You didn't hear that? You took me literally, all right? So why life might exist out there? And I'm going to take, first and foremost, a scientific look at it and then bring in and come at it from theologically after I get done with that, all right? So bear with me, track with the science, and then we'll get into the theological discussion because I think both of those weigh in really importantly. So why life might exist? Everybody's seen the periodic table of the elements, correct? There are 91 naturally occurring ones. Technetium officially should be naturally occurring, but it's all decayed away, so it doesn't exist out there. There are 91 naturally occurring elements. This is that list of elements sorted by abundance in the universe. Now notice again the logarithmic scale. Going from here to here, this is 100 times more abundant than this. If you will notice, way up here in this corner, we got hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Helium is second. Third is oxygen, carbon, then you've got neon, iron, and nitrogen. Now, let me ask a question. If you were to list what are the 4 most important elements for life, what are they? Oxygen, hydrogen, carbon. Nope, helium has absolutely no use to life. That's a good guess, but that's wrong. Iron? No? Nitrogen, yeah. If there's actually, you need some phosphorus, you need some sulfur in there as well. But if you look at life, it's built around carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Without oxygen and hydrogen, you don't have water. Carbon is the element that has the chemical complexity that life requires. And what's interesting is that when you look at this table from a how do you make elements perspective, it ought to go in terms of abundance, helium or hydrogen, helium, then lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and neon. Because that's the mass, and that generally things go by mass by what determines abundance. But what you'll notice is that we got hydrogen's the most abundant, that makes sense. Helium's the most abundant, that makes sense. And then we jump down to carbon and oxygen, which are very heavy comparatively. And we talked a little bit about this morning, that stars make, except for hydrogen and helium, stars make all of this. And what you see is that the stars make the elements that life requires. Our universe is designed in such a way that the elements that life requires are made in great abundance. And so not only does Earth have a bunch of oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen and carbon, so does every other planet in the world, in the universe. And there are lots of them. So the universe makes the elements in great abundance that life requires. We've also been able to find planets outside of our solar system. And we started finding them back in the early 1990s. This one was actually found around a pulsar. It's not particularly useful, but when you start talking about Earth-like, planets like in our solar system around sun-like stars, you can see that once you start here, it just kind of ramps up. And what that's a sign of is that as our technology got better, we found more and more planets. Now, I have it cutting off here at 2015. That's just simply a lack of, I haven't updated the plot. We've found probably close to 8, 9, 10,000 planets at this point outside our solar system, which is really impressive when you understand how hard it is to find planets. But what's fascinating about this, so the better the technology we get, the more planets we see. It's almost like there's a bunch of them out there, and as we build more technology, we can see more and more of them. But if we look at how they're distributed in mass, we see something pretty important as well. So this is mass in terms of the mass of Jupiter. Jupiter, if I remember correctly, is about 1,000 times more massive than Earth, or sorry, 300 times more massive than Earth. So this is much larger than Earth. But what you'll notice is that as you go out, more and more mass, the trend goes down and down and down. And again, this is logarithmic. It's kind of like earthquakes for people who live in California. There's a few big ones and a whole lot of small ones. or it's like hurricanes. There's few big ones, a whole lot of small storms. Lots of things in the universe happen on this, what's called a power law. But the smaller the mass, the more frequent they become. And so astronomers can take this kind of data and say, how many planets are there in our galaxy, just in the Milky Way? What do you think that number is? And then I'll come back to your question, Kate. What do you think that number is? How many planets in our galaxy are there?
100,000.
100,000.
A million.
A million. Well, the larger planets are easy to see. As the abundance increases, the mass decreases. This means that in our galaxy alone, there are 400 billion planets Earth size or larger. Just for scale, our galaxy has somewhere between 200 to 400 billion planets. On average, one Earth-sized planet exists around every star. So not only does our universe produce the elements that life requires, our universe produces the planet that life requires. You had a question, Kate?
What do you mean by abundance increases as mass decreases? You mean like there's more smaller planets than there are bigger planets?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Is that like? Okay, never mind. I understand. Okay.
It's just a real common feature that there's a few big things and a whole lot of small things. Whatever a few big and small are, that's just standard way that plays out. So why life might exist? Our universe produces the substances that life requires. There are a huge number of planets in the universe. We notice that most of the region in the universe, everything kind of behaves similarly. And so it's reasonable to think that the stuff that life requires might be out there and there might be other life out there. Now, I have not answered or even addressed the question of, is it sentient, is it bacteria, is it soulful? I haven't even addressed any of that. It's just saying that the stuff that life requires, our universe is designed to produce. And if our universe is designed to produce it, maybe life comes about, maybe there's more life out there than what we think. It's reasonable to think that. The short answer is we don't know. And so it's a fun scientific question, but it's reasonable to think life might exist beyond Earth. Yeah, Nick.
Would it be reasonable to think that life is only miraculously created by God?
Yes.
Evidence in Scripture.
That is my position, and I will get to that in just a few minutes. But yes, my contention is we wouldn't expect life here unless God created it. And so that's really the question I have in here is, if God created life here, might he have created life somewhere else? But that's jumping ahead. So let's look at why life might not exist. There's as you study the science around life and what does it take, and we've even looked at how do the laws of, I've talked about how the laws of physics naturally produce carbon and oxygen and the things that life requires, but yet when you really probe into it, the laws of physics are tuned to make those, which is interesting because that's what life requires. So even though the universe produces it, it still has evidence of design in it. And that idea of design is not a controversial idea, scientifically speaking. I mean, here's Francis Crick. Anybody know what Francis Crick is famous for? What is the backbone of life? Chocolate. Little more fundamental than that. DNA. And what is the structure of DNA? What's that? RNA takes DNA and makes stuff out of it, but physically, what does DNA look like? It has 4 sugars, and they're stacked up in a way so that there's 2 strands and they make a helix. They make a helix, and so there's the double helical nature. Francis Crick and James Watson discovered the double helical nature, and they awarded the Nobel Prize for it. And he makes this comment, and why I point this out is that he is a self-professed agnostic or atheist. He's very hostile towards Christianity, and he makes this statement: biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. Now my question is, why does he have to make that statement? It's because when we look at things related to life, we see things look designed. And if they look designed, maybe they are designed. He's saying, we need to remember they're not designed, they're evolved, even though they look designed. And he's a biologist that does this, but a very prominent skeptic who is a physicist, when looking at how stars produce carbon, nitrogen, or carbon and oxygen, makes the statement that it looks like a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry and biology. So this idea that things look designed is not a controversial idea. Scientists will argue about whether it's actual design or just apparent design, but things look designed. So how are some of the ways they look designed? As you said, the genetic code is made of 4 sugars. I'm just going to call them U, C, A, and G. There's actually cool names for each of them. But when you're talking about the amino acids that are made, which are amino acids go into proteins, proteins do all the work inside the cell. What you'll notice is that the amino acids are specified by 3 different sugars. So there's UUU and UUC specifies phenylalanine. There's UUA, UUG, CUU, CUC, CUA, CUG, all specify leucine. So when you see those letters put together, that segment of the code is going to say, let's produce leucine. Now, if you've got 3 letters that can each take 4 values, how many different options do you have? That's 4 times 4, which is? Times 4, which is? 64. So you got 64 different options, but there are only 20 different amino acids that come up in biology, or in human life. So you got 40 options, 64 different possibilities, but only 20 different amino acids that get produced. So what you see is there's a lot of redundancy there. Turns out that redundancy is very good or crucial for making sure that when the genetic code is played out and works, that it does what it's supposed to. Because we live in a noisy environment where occasionally a U can flip to a C, or a U could flip to a G. And what you see is that even when that happens, it's still, if it's in this third pair here, it still produces the same thing. In other words, there's an error correction mechanism built into DNA. And in fact, scientists can look at how good this error correction mechanism is, and it's literally 1 in a million. It's that good. Now, to give you just a kind of scale of that, I mean, everybody's familiar with IQ, not specifying whether it's good, bad, or other, but you know that there's a whole bunch of people around 100, and then as you get out to the wings, it gets more and more rare that happens. And so if we go with 100, that's right there in the middle. That's kind of average, if you will. You go out to 130, these are the bright people, typically have IQs around 130. You get up to 150, that's Mensa, genius level. You get up to this is like Albert Einstein type thing. Our genetic code, in terms of its ability to minimize the errors that come up in a noisy environment, is literally 1 in a million. It's designed to work in a noisy environment. And I find this particularly fascinating because I do a lot of computer programming for one of my jobs. And I've got to say, it's actually pretty easy to make my code do what I want it to. There's a few steps, make it work. And then I spend most of my effort figuring out how to deal with all the errors that will come up. Somebody will enter something stupid in. Can I account for that? I'm doing a calculation and for whatever reason it divides by 0. Can I account for that? Because that doesn't work. How do I handle all the errors come up? Well, our genetic code has an error correction mechanism far better than the best computer code I've ever written. And I'm pretty good at writing computer code. So it looks like it's designed. When we see how our solar system plays out, this is a picture of the early solar system and then where we are today. And notice here, this is just the star Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. And what you'll notice is that they're kind of, compared to over there, the orbits are nice and small, or much smaller, and there's this big cloud of junk. This is like comets and asteroids out there. Well, very early in the history of our solar system, things kind of jostled around, and we end up in an environment like this. And what interesting things do you notice about that picture compared to this picture?
All that junk spread out.
All the junk is gone. Not only is it spread out, it's gone. It's 1,000 times less junk here than there is here. Is that what you noticed, or did you notice something else?
I was just looking how the rings are not perfectly centered in
They're not perfectly centered, and in fact, you'll notice that the rings are not even in the same order anymore. So Neptune and Uranus flipped orbits. So somewhere in our solar system, the planets migrated, and what ends up happening is all of that junk gets scattered out, planets switch orbits, and now we end up with our solar system here. Turns out that is really important because these sorts of things, this junk is what comes in and periodically hits Earth. There was an asteroid that hit in the Yucatan Peninsula about 65 million years ago that wiped out the dinosaurs and about 90+% of all the life on the Earth. If this event had not happened, those sorts of collisions would happen not every 50 to 60 million years, every 50 to 60,000 years. That's the time scale of humanity. You have to kind of wonder, would a planet where you're getting hit by something like that every few tens of millions of years, or few tens of thousands of years, be a place where life could survive? And so we see this is evidence of God tuning our solar system so that we can be here to live here well. We look at the moon. Earth has a very large companion in comparison to its parent. It was caused by a Mars-sized collider. The moon is critical for tides. If we don't have a moon, we don't have much in the way of tides. Tides are very good at recycling the nutrients out of the onto and off of the planet. It stabilizes the orbit, and again, when we look at this, we see evidence of fine-tuning in that. So the short answer is that when we look, we see a bunch of evidence of design that God has orchestrated events so that Earth can support life. And I kind of alluded to this. When you look at Venus, Venus was originally covered in water, and yet today it's got this really heavy atmosphere. Temperature's hot enough that paper would spontaneously burst into flames if there were any oxygen there, which there isn't, or free oxygen, not just oxygen. No magnetic field. So Mars, even though it would be habitable by our standards of looking out into the heavens, Venus, we know that it can't support life, even though it started very much like Earth. And similarly, when we look at Mars, it's got very little atmosphere. The atmosphere on the surface of Mars is 50 times less dense than the top of Mount Everest. Just not a place that's conducive to life. Very cold temperatures, massive volcanoes, which means all the tectonic activity has started. Again, all the water has disappeared. Yeah, Trent.
Why is Elon trying to go there?
Because we like to explore. It's a rather inhospitable place. It's, like I said, we're going to have to do things. If we're going to go there, we have to build pods that allow us to maintain an atmosphere dense enough that we can be there. We have to build pods that will prevent the cosmic radiation from destroying us. There's all sorts of things we have to do, but we love to explore. And it's a great challenge, and it's cool. But if you want to look and say, hey, let's just live somewhere, Mars is not the place to go. Yeah, Zach. Didn't they create water on Mars? What do you mean?
I heard in the news or something that they created water on Mars.
Well, we found water on Mars. So we found evidence of water on Mars, but there is no liquid water on Mars right now. In fact, what we do is when we know that water covers the Earth. It's critical for life. When we go out and look at Mars, what we find is evidence of water on Mars. So this is a track made by one of NASA's probes. It was designed to last 30 days. About 10 years later, these two things are still driving around, but they have 6 wheels on them, and on one of them, the Spirit, its name was Spirit, one of the front wheels quit working. So NASA, being very creative, said, well, let's just turn it around and drag the wheel along. And as it dragged the wheel along, it unmarged this white stuff. Can't unearth it, wrong planet. Unmarged it. Do you know what this white stuff is? Salt. It's a kind of salt. It's 90+% pure silica. Do you know how you get 90+% pure silica? You have a large body of water that's being fed by silicates, and the silica precipitates out, and you get very pure silica. So this was under a large body of water, and this silica is scattered throughout the planet. In fact, there was another, it was not a rover, it was a lander. It got out there. You can see the silica as it dug down under the planet, But really what I want to point out are these little 3 or 4 little rocks down here that on Martian day 20 are there, and on Martian day 24 are no longer there. The reason why they're no longer there is those are ice cubes, and they just evaporated. And so we see that Mars was covered in water, but it doesn't have liquid water today because all of its water has disappeared, whereas here on Earth, it's still there. Sean, you are free to go back to your chair. You no longer have to stay on the we believe there's life side. I just wanted to let you know that. Yes, Brett.
So Elon Musk tweeted out nuke Mars. Would it be possible to nuke Mars and terraform it so it would evaporate the water, hopefully creating a atmosphere? Because his whole campaign about it is kind of trying to artificially create an atmosphere for Mars. I don't know if that would work.
Well, so it is true you could do things to generate heat, get the water to evaporate, and make an atmosphere. The problem you run into is that Mars' mass is not large enough to retain the water. So you can get the water up into the atmosphere, but it's going to quickly evaporate off into space. And so it's a temporary solution that is going to, one, you're going to have all the radiation there from a nuke. But on top of that, even if you get the water up in the atmosphere, it's just going to evaporate off into space. And so it's still not going to be much of an atmosphere there. And it takes a lot of nukes to do that. So it's a pretty massive project. We think, oh yeah, we can terraform, we can change the atmosphere of a planet, but there's a lot of mass up in the atmosphere. Yeah, Trent.
Is there a better planet than Mars that you guys have found? That's maybe like farther away, but more or less.
The challenge we have is that with Mars, we can look at it in detail. All the planets outside of the solar system that we found, we have just the biggest, we know their mass, we know their orbit, we don't know what kind of atmosphere they have, we don't know what kind of surface they have, we don't know anything like that. So there are planets that in principle might be better, but we really don't know what they look like. And what we see is from our own solar system, there's lots of ways where Earth-like planets, though we think they could be habitable, go haywire and can't support life. And so that's the reason why we see evidence of God's work here on Earth transforming the uninhabitable planet into a place teeming with a great array and diversity of life. And so we see evidence of life. So life looks designed, Earth looks designed. That's a good reason to think that this may be the only place where there's life in the universe. Now, which is it? Hey, maybe here's a different question. Can we find the life? Well, I will say, there was a fellow, we found a planet around a particular star, and he goes, personally, given the ubiquity and propensity of life to flourish, wherever it can, I would say, my own personal feeling is that the chances of life on this planet are 100%. I have almost no doubt about it. Now, this was a planet that has this nice, cool Lisa 586, series of letters and numbers. But the idea was, okay, we found a place where it looks like liquid water could be, where you get liquid water, you're going to have life, it's just going to be there. And we had this discussion about habitable planets and how could that not be habitable, and the reality of it is we just we don't have the information to know what this looks like. The analogy I would give is, imagine I tell you, all right, you have to choose a team that can compete in the NBA. And the way you need to choose this team is I am going to set up in the dead of night, when it's as dark as can be, a light bulb 1 mile away. And I'm going to have a bunch of people walk in front of it. Choose your NBA team. You just don't have the information you need. You may be able to get whether somebody's tall or short, but you don't know whether they have any athletic ability. Can they shoot a ball? Can they dribble? You just don't have the information you need. When it comes to looking for planets and asking, are they really habitable, we just don't have the information because finding planets is really, really hard. Anybody know what a lightning bug is? Few people know what a firefly, lightning bug, yes. So these are these little bugs, rear ends light up, cool as all get out, incredible design in that, because that light happens with virtually no energy dissipation, so the bugs don't heat up when they, it's just too cool for words. In fact, we've looked at how the scales on the abdomen are, because it's going from a liquid environment to a gas environment, and that will reflect light back in. And we've looked at how that scaling works, and we've actually designed LEDs that have better light transmission by mimicking what we see in nature. So these things are little design cool things. But the whole point about these is these little bugs are not very bright. And everybody's seen one of those big spotlights, hey, come shop at my store type place. Take the biggest one of those you've ever seen, put the lightning bug on the rim, and say, build me an instrument that can find the light of the lightning bug in the midst of that incredibly powerful beam of light. That's the challenge. In spite of that challenge, we found 5,000 to 10,000 planets. That's really cool. The particular technique that's the most versatile, which actually kind of gives us some hint of this, is that occasionally, as you're looking at a star through your telescope, it's set up so that the planets go across the face and it dims the light output from the star. So it's coming along here and it dips down, and that allows us to tell how big the planet is, what its orbit is, all sorts of things. But it doesn't tell us whether the planet has the right kind of atmosphere that would allow liquid water to exist. It doesn't tell us whether liquid water actually exists on the planet. It doesn't tell us anything. And at best, it gets down to a few Earth masses. And so it's just really hard to answer this question. And will we be able to find it? I already showed you that earlier today. You know, we can't even find the stuff in our solar system yet. So will we be able to find it? Not for the next couple of decades. So we can't answer the question scientifically unless some civilization out there just happens to beam some sort of signal that we find here on Earth. Believe it or not, I've got a paper published in the scientific literature that says we looked for that in a couple places and we didn't find it. So if you look up for a paper called Optical SETI, O-S-E-T-I, you'll find that I have I'm an author on one of those papers. But we can't find it. But this is the question that intrigued me. I think there's great reason to think that we may be the only life in the universe, but it got me thinking, what happens if, as astronomers keep looking, we find evidence of life in the universe? What would that do to my faith as a Christian? I'm curious, if we find life out there, what would that do? Would that be a problem? Not?
It doesn't change the gospel.
Doesn't change the gospel? Why so?
Depends on what kind of life you find.
I'm gonna up the ante all the way and say we find intelligent, sentient life out there.
Then that's a whole different story.
That's a whole different story. Do we still have Christianity if that happens? You say yes, Maddie. Why?
Well, he's omnipotent.
Okay.
He wanted to make more life equal. I don't see
So it's kind of God's choice whether it happens or not. All right. Okay.
But for my faith, whether he does or doesn't.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Unless they can like 100% disprove, not really, because like she said, if he wanted life to be out there, he could.
Okay.
Like, for me, to like fully turn me, an alien would have to come down and be like, yo, I actually created this. Here's the video, and we actually live inside a marble on a cat's necklace.
Okay. Little Men in Black action there. All right. Okay. Katie.
Well, I had a thought, and I don't know if it's valid.
Well, let's say it. See whether it is or not.
I don't feel like if we found, let's just say we found other humans, okay, and they live on the planet Xenon, okay, and other humans would totally screw up the whole gospel because Jesus came to Earth, you know, God
Okay.
comes to Earth. That was already a huge deal.
Uh huh.
I know he's omnipresent and he can go everywhere, but like, that just, I don't know.
It seems like it messes things up, doesn't it?
It does because whole
Mhm.
beginning and like he was telling us about how like the whole theme of creation was redemption and it was all setting up for the redemption of
Mhm.
people. So I'm like, I don't
Good. You're feeling the wow. What do I do with this? Cooper.
So I feel like what breaks this down a little bit is when Adam sinned and the world fell into sin.
Okay.
The curse of sin fell on the earth.
Right.
So that did not just fall on the earth, that fell on creation itself. So animals were affected by that, and any sort of life, any sort of creation, even vegetation was affected by the curse of sin. So
I'm gonna give a 10 to that. I think there's a strong case you can make that that curse was limited to earth. But I do agree with what you're saying. It's more than just humanity.
So if that's the case, I feel like that does contradict Scripture.
Okay?
So I'm curious your evidence is for that.
Okay.
Just to finish my thought.
Yes, please.
So if that's the case, and let's say it does affect all creation, all of God's creation.
Okay.
If that's the case, then that does supersede earth. So that would be any creation.
Mm-hmm.
And where that goes against God's characteristic is when, if the people where he has elsewhere, let's say there is intelligent life, and I mean, they don't even have to be people, but just intelligent life elsewhere, they would be affected by that same curse. And if they did not commit sin, then that is an unjust judgment upon them. Therefore, that contradicts God's character.
I see. I love the way you're thinking about this, because you're thinking, whatever we end up with, what theology, who does that say about who God is? And if we got God punishing people unjustly, that's not correct, right? I love that thinking. I think because what I love about that is that as I've asked this question, these are the sorts of things running through my head. And I've had various answers during my lifetime that I thought worked better than others. But this is what I realized, is that this is not something that Christians are now, ooh, we've got this possibility of finding life out there. What do we do? Christians have been thinking about this for centuries, if not millennia. You can go back and track people asking and wrestling this question well back before the time of Jesus. In fact, I would not be surprised in heaven to find out that Adam and Eve were arguing about whether there's life out there. And we're talking sentient life, not just bacteria. So this is not something that Christians are new to the game and thinking, oh, we've got this new thing, we got to scramble. Christians have thought about this long before the scientists had any chance to weigh in on this. And Christians have taken a lot of different positions on this based on what they knew of who God is and what his character is. You know who Galileo Galilei is, right? Anybody know what he's famous for? Outside of getting in trouble with the Catholic Church. He invented telescopes. Or rather, he made telescopes useful for actually observing the heavens. He was a devout Christian. He thought that God had created life here on earth alone. That was his position. Anybody know who Johannes Kepler is? No. He is also a very devout Christian, used a lot of Galileo's telescopes to make very precise measurements of where stars were in the sky and gave us a picture of how do we actually do the calculations. Also a very devout Christian. He thought God created life on every body out there. So Mars had life, Venus had life, Neptune, every planet out there had life on it. So here you've got two devout Christian scholars who come at this and come to a different conclusion. And just in the same way, when we're looking at anything, we need to not say, well, this is what some Christians say. We need to ask the question of Christians who hold Scripture in high regard, what do they have to say? And it turns out Christians have thought about this a lot. And there are many different ways to step through these important theological questions. Because what we know, let's say, what are the some of the essential pieces of Christianity? Who's the creator? God. Okay, God is the creator. And what did he do in Scripture here? Let's go back a little bit further. So God created the universe. He fashioned earth. And who did he put on it? Put Adam and Eve in his image on there. What did those first people do? Rebelled against God. And what is the curse, the payment, or the penalty for that? Death. Separation from God, exactly. And how did God redeem humanity? Sent his son. Now, what needs to be true for God to send his son? Well, so if God is going to send his son, can he be a unitary being? Can he? A single person. He cannot be a single person, because if he's a single person, he's coming down and dying, and God's dying, and he's no longer... There's a problem there. So what needs to be true of God?
He's a Trinity.
He's a Trinity. Wow, that's interesting that Christianity teaches that. Because there's God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. Did Jesus, the second person of the Godhead, die on the cross? What did he do? No, he didn't. What did he do?
He gave himself up,
Before that,
cried out to God.
no. When he came and lived on earth, what did he do? He took on a human nature. He's the God-man, fully God, fully man. Jesus, the God-man, died on the cross. God can't die. Jesus, the God-man, could die on the cross. So theologically speaking, we've got God, the triune God, the second person of the Godhead, comes to earth, takes on a human nature, dies on the cross to redeem humanity, and offers salvation to all who accept. Okay, so that's the basic message there, right? Now let's ask the question, if there's life out there, somewhere else, sentient, does that change that basic message? Does anything about there being life out there change who the Creator is? Does it change that that Creator fashioned a planet like Earth where he introduced humanity? Does it change that humanity rebelled against God here on Earth? Does it change that God, the second person of the Godhead, Jesus, took on a human flesh, became the God-man, and died on the cross to redeem us?
It does for people on other planets. Because how would they know that?
Well, why would
Well,
they need to know
that's
that?
that's a different question. Now you see, so let's start asking the question, what other possibilities are consistent with that might be true?
That there's life out there that hasn't sinned and
Oh,
doesn't need a savior.
there may be life out there that hasn't sinned and doesn't need a savior. Y'all like C.S. Lewis, correct?
Yes.
Anybody read the Space Trilogy? Oh, we got at least one. Oh, we got two. What's the second book of the Space Trilogy? What's the redemption? Huh? It's been a while. Huh? And what is the redemption message on Paralandra? They didn't sin. See, this is things that Christians have thought about for a long time. And C.S. Lewis is just the latest in the group of people. So one option is there may be life out there, but it never sinned, so it has no need of redemption. What other options do we have? Yes, Trent.
Like you said, how would they know about Jesus' story? Maybe they're able to observe us if we don't know about them, but then that would be splitting up believers.
Or possibly that Jesus' life, death, and resurrection on earth is so important and transcendent that the scriptures on their planet say, hey, yes, you've rebelled. This is how you're redeemed because my son died on the cross. Now, I know you don't like that. Why don't you like that?
Doesn't that break the authority of Scripture?
Why?
Because, well, Scripture is for the body of Christ, so it's for believers, people who believe in God.
Okay.
And God even commanded and stated that it is the complete Scripture for anybody who is a believer. Therefore, whether they're on this planet or not, if they are a believer of God, then that Scripture they would be held to.
I think you're extrapolating that second part of that statement beyond what it may mean that, but it need not mean that. And so again, I don't expect that we're going to find life, but if we find life, what I recognize is that Christians have thought it's maybe the means of redemption is Christ's death and life, death, and resurrection here, and that's what their scriptures reveal to them. Because unless God reveals himself to us, we don't know who God is. He's revealed himself to us this way. If he's going to reveal himself to them, he will do it in a way that's consistent with what he says here, but it's still his revelation to them. And their scriptures may look a little different, but they'd be coherent and consistent with ours.
How would they know anything about God at all?
Unless-
In the sense of, like, God had the redemption plan for earth before he even created the earth because he knew that people were going to sin before he even created the earth.
Yeah?
So if there was another earth where he knew people weren't going to sin, how would he reveal himself?
Why?
Like, he
revealed himself before Adam and Eve sinned.
I understand that.
He revealed it.
They would know so much less about God than I feel like.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
Because
Let me ask that question differently. What is the source of everything we know about God?
God.
His revelation to us.
yes.
Why would that not be true of those people? God would still reveal. If he's created them, he will reveal himself to them. That is part of the nature of who he is.
Say that in the Bible.
It doesn't. It's silent. The question is, what is the silence? Does it mean that there isn't? Or does it mean that he hasn't told us what he's done somewhere else? Tricia.
So do you think that if there was, say, television
What do you mean by the same thing he did here over there?
If they sinned
Uh-huh.
and God had a redemption plan, so say we sinned, God had a redemption plan in Christ. Do you think he would do the same thing over there?
It depends. So it may be they didn't sin and have no need of redemption. It may be they sinned and God has a different means of redemption. It may be they sinned and God offers no means of redemption. We don't like that idea, but that's effectively what happened with the angelic realm. One-time choice, no chance of redemption for the angelic realm. You don't like that one, I can tell. Zach. Why did he make this one? So you see, the question we're asking is, what might be God's purpose in doing that? So when I ask the question, what might be God's purpose in making us? It's not because he needed somebody to worship him. It's not because he was lonely, because he's a triune God. It's not because he's like, it'd just be good to have some people to serve me. At the end of the day, as I've thought about it, the only reason he created us is that he wanted to invite us into the relationship he has in and of himself. And so that's what he would be doing there as well. I'm not arguing that any of these are what God did. All I'm saying is that as Christians have thought about this, they've said, hey, here are the possibilities that are consistent with what God has revealed to us that might be true for other creatures. Yeah, Keely.
So you mentioned about how whatever happened here, he could put in the Bible on another life, like
Yes.
planet. So why wouldn't he do that for us if there's like something for us to learn from their planet, but they could put it in that Bible? Like, why wouldn't he do the same?
I don't know.
We're
Because
talking hypothetical about hypothetical.
what I'm saying is we know that Jesus came and took on a human nature and lived here.
And secondly, how would he do that? How did they get to that? Like, know that Jesus came and died, because there really wouldn't be a way for them to know.
Why do we know it? Because God revealed it to us.
Yeah, but
Why would they know it? Because God would reveal it to them.
But it happened here, and then we had people write it down, so it would go on for ages, and it would
Yeah, but that's the process that God used to reveal himself to us. The reason we know that is because God chose to reveal himself to us. If he chose to reveal himself to us, I think we can be pretty confident that he would choose to reveal himself to those people as well.
Well, why would he split us up as believers?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. There's nothing in there that says, oh, this is inconsistent with God's character, but he hasn't given us the answer to that. Now, one reason why I think he might split us up, and this is another answer to why there might be life and how this would be consistent, is Jesus Christ, the second person of the triune Godhead, took on a human nature and lived among us. Did Jesus taking on a human nature change him? Did it add to him, make him bigger, smaller, or anything? No, because that's the nature of God. Now, we are created in God's image, correct? Do we reflect God's image completely?
No.
Might it be possible for God to create other creatures that are made in his image that are different than us? So if one reason why he might have us separate is that we are created in his image and we have this image, and they are created in his image and that image is different, and so in the same way that Jesus took on a human nature, he might have taken on a Klingon nature as well. Now you'll notice, every one of these you think, oh, no, I don't like that, and I'm right there with you. There's all of these, I'm like, that's a little uncomfortable. But I don't get to say, ooh, I'm uncomfortable. What I ultimately have to ask is, what does Scripture say? And is this inconsistent, or is there anything in Scripture that rules it out? And as Christians have studied this, they've basically come up with 6 options. 1, they never sinned, don't need redemption. 2, they sinned, have no means of redemption. 3, they have sinned, their means of redemption is Christ's death and resurrection here on the earth. 4, Christ took on a nature on their planet, or in their image, or Christ took on their nature and died on the cross. didn't sin. Different means of redemption? Was that? There's no means of redemption, or we're the only ones. All I'm saying is, this is, as we think about this, let's make sure that we're going and saying, all right, what does Scripture say? What's a good theology? Who is God? How has he revealed himself to us? And we don't get to rule out things that we're uncomfortable, but are still consistent with what he's revealed. And we don't get to change the way he's revealed himself to us.
Has he actually revealed anything that there's life outside of this earth?
There's the angelic realm. And I can give you, this is part of, I can make a reasonable inference from what he's revealed to us. That we know that earth is filled with life. You go ask, where could life exist on earth? And we find life there. In fact, places where we thought life couldn't exist, we find life there. We know that he created the angelic realm. So we're not the only creatures, sentient creatures out there. And so if God fills his creation on earth as it looks like he has, which is what the evidence says in his revelation, it may be that he's filled the creation out there. It's really a theological question. If God has created life here, might he have chosen to create life somewhere else?
Why does it ultimately matter if we actually know?
I don't think it matters that we know. I think it matters that we think theologically soundly about it. And if you say, life can't be because of X, and X is theologically unsound, that's bad. If you say, it's unimportant because theologically there's good ways to handle all that, that's a reasonable way to handle it. Yes, Trent.
If we believe that the Bible is his only word and it's the only truth,
Yeah.
and we make contact with a different, species that has their own truth,
Right.
that it was revealed by God, there's going to be conflict of, well, our truth is true, but then our truth is true.
If God is who he says he is, will there be a conflict? Now we assume that they're going to come down and they say, well, this is our story and it's very different than ours. But if God is who he says he is, there's a bunch, like 12 ifs in there, I get you. But if we make contact and they come and they say, hey, here's what we know, why would we expect that to be in conflict with what he's revealed to us? It's the same discussion of, will science ever show the Bible wrong? If God's revealed himself here, and God's revealed himself here, and then God revealed himself to them, those revelations are all going to be coherent. We are going to deal with interpretation issues, and we're going to deal with volitional issues, because it may be the beings that decide to come are the ones who are the skeptics who want to convince people God doesn't exist. I'm not saying this is a simple discussion, but you see how fun this discussion is? No. Who's had a good time with this discussion? Who doesn't like this discussion? Okay, great. Has it made you think? Yes. Has it encouraged you to make sure you theologically think well? Then I'm okay with you being upset at me.
Oh, I'm not upset.
Great, okay. So are we about done, or do we have, okay, we need to cut it off there. We're still here for 6 more sessions. We can have lots of good time talking about this. All right, so we'll be done.